Tupac was walking through his old neighborhood when a homeless man called out his name. When he turned around and recognized who it was, the sight hit him like a punch to the soul. This was his best friend from childhood, and what had happened to him would haunt Tupac forever. It was a warm September afternoon in 1995, and Tupac Shakur had just finished a high-profile photo shoot for Vibe magazine in downtown Los Angeles. The shoot had gone well. He'd been confident, charismatic, projecting the image of a man who had conquered the world. But as he sat in the back of his black Mercedes, watching the city blur past his tinted windows, he felt an emptiness that fame and money couldn't fill. He'd been thinking a lot lately about the cost of success, about the people he'd left behind on his journey to the top. Success in hip-hop was supposed to be about representing your community, lifting others up with you. But lately, Tupac felt isolated from the very communities that had shaped him. Instead of heading straight home to his mansion in the Hollywood Hills, he made an impulsive decision that would shatter his heart and change his entire perspective on success, loyalty, and the razor-thin line between making it out and getting left behind. "Change of plans," he told his driver suddenly. "Take me to Compton, Rosecrans, and Central." His driver, a middle-aged man named James who had been working for celebrities for over a decade, glanced at Tupac in the rearview mirror with concern. "Mr. Shakur, that's not exactly the safest neighborhood, especially for someone in your position." "That's exactly why I need to go there," Tupac replied, staring out the window. "That neighborhood made me who I am. I need to remember where I came from." But nobody in that neighborhood could have predicted that in exactly 23 minutes, one of hip-hop's biggest stars would be crying on a street corner, holding a man who used to be his brother. As they drove toward Compton, Tupac's mind drifted back to when he was 10 and his family had moved there. From New York, it had been a culture shock, the gang violence, the police harassment, the way poverty seemed to hang over everything. But it had also been where he'd learned to fight, discovered poetry, and made the friendship that defined his understanding of loyalty. Marcus Williams. The name brought back memories that made Tupac's chest tighten. Marcus had been everything Tupac wasn't. Tough where Tupac was sensitive, street smart where Tupac was bookish, physically strong where Tupac was small. But somehow they'd become inseparable. Marcus had taken Tupac under his wing, taught him survival rules, protected him from older kids who wanted to prey on the new kid from New York. More importantly, Marcus had been the first person to hear Tupac's poetry and tell him it was good. As the Mercedes pulled up to the intersection of Rosecrans and Central, Tupac felt his chest constrict with a mixture of nostalgia and dread. This was the first time he'd been back to this exact spot since his family had moved to Oakland when he was 13, and the contrast between his current life and this environment was almost overwhelming. Everything looked smaller than his memory had preserved it, but also more desperate. The corner store where he used to steal candy with Marcus was boarded up, windows covered with graffiti. The basketball court where they'd played one-on-one was cracked and littered with broken glass. The apartment building where Marcus had lived with his grandmother was covered in gang tags. "You want me to wait here, Mr. Shakur?" James asked nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the surroundings. "Yeah, but park where you can see me," Tupac replied, stepping out and immediately feeling the weight of stairs. This might take a while. As he walked the familiar streets, Tupac was struck by how many memories each corner brought back. This was where he'd learned that respect was something you fought for daily. This was where he'd written his first rap verses. This was where Marcus Williams had taught him how to throw a proper punch and where they'd sworn they'd always have each other's backs. The irony wasn't lost on Tupac that he was now walking these streets wearing a $500 outfit and jewelry worth more than most people here made in a year. He'd made it out, achieved everything he and Marcus used to dream about when they were kids. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that his success was somehow incomplete, somehow hollow without the people who had believed in him first. Marcus Williams. They hadn't spoken in over 15 years, not since Tupac's family had moved to Oakland and his career had started taking off. They'd promised to stay in touch, had sworn that distance couldn't break their bond. But life had pulled them in different directions, and as Tupac's fame grew, he'd found it harder and harder to maintain connections with his past. He'd often wondered what had happened to Marcus, had even considered hiring a private investigator to track him down. But something had always stopped him. Fear, maybe, or the worry that Marcus might want something from him, or that their reunion might be awkward and disappointing. But what he was about to discover would shatter his heart into 1,000 pieces and force him to confront the true cost of leaving people behind. Tupac had walked about 6 blocks when he heard it, a raspy voice calling his name. "Pac? Yo, Pac? That you, man?" The voice sounded familiar but damaged. Tupac turned around and saw a homeless man approaching cautiously, as if afraid Tupac might run away. The man was skeletal thin, clothes dirty and torn. His face was covered with sores, teeth mostly gone, eyes hollow and haunted. But something about those eyes made Tupac's blood run cold with recognition. "Marcus?" Tupac whispered. "Marcus Williams?" The homeless man's face broke into a heartbreaking smile. "Yeah, it's me, brother. It's your boy Marcus." For a moment, Tupac couldn't breathe. This couldn't be Marcus Williams. Marcus had been the strongest kid on the block, built like a linebacker, his protector and hero. This broken man couldn't be the same person, but it was. Tupac could see it in the familiar tilt of his head, in the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled despite everything. "Oh my God," Tupac said, tears streaming down his face. "Marcus, what happened to you?" Marcus looked down at himself, suddenly ashamed. "Life happened, Pac. Life happened, and I wasn't strong enough to fight it." The simple honesty of that statement hit Tupac like a sledgehammer to the chest. Here was the man who had taught him about strength, admitting that life had beaten him down. Here was his childhood hero, reduced to begging on the same streets where they used to run and play. Tupac found himself face to face with what could have been his own fate if circumstances had been different, if luck had broken the other way, if 1 or 2 crucial decisions had gone differently. The only thing separating them was chance, timing, and a series of random events that had lifted Tupac up while pulling Marcus down. "Man, look at you, though," Marcus said, his voice filled with genuine pride despite his circumstances. "You made it out. You became everything we used to dream about." Marcus touched the gold chain around Tupac's neck with wonder. "I heard your music on the radio sometimes. When Dear Mama came out, I was in a shelter downtown, and I told everybody, 'That's my boy. That's my little brother Pac.'" The words hit Tupac like bullets. While he'd been accepting awards and making millions, his childhood best friend had been living in shelters, homeless but still proud of him from a distance. "Why didn't you find me?" Tupac asked desperately. "Why didn't you reach out?" "I would have helped you," Marcus laughed bitterly. "Call you? Pac, look at me." You think I was going to call Tupac Shakur and say, "Hey, remember your old friend Marcus? Well, I'm a crack addict living in abandoned buildings. Can you help me out?" The raw honesty broke something inside Tupac. This was his brother, his protector. And while Tupac had been climbing to success, Marcus had been falling through every crack society offered. "Tell me what happened," Tupac said, his voice thick with tears. "I need to understand." Marcus hesitated, looking around at the people who were starting to gather, curious about why a famous rapper was crying on their street corner with a homeless man. "You sure you want to hear this?" "It ain't a pretty story, Pac. It ain't the kind of story that ends with hope and redemption." "I need to hear it," Tupac insisted. "I need to know what happened to my brother." Marcus hesitated, then sat down slowly on the curb. "You sure you want to hear this?" "It ain't pretty. I need to hear it." Marcus began telling the story that would haunt Tupac forever. "After you moved to Oakland, I tried to keep it together. Stayed in school, tried to make good grades. But Nana got sick when I was 15, cancer, real bad." Tupac nodded, throat tight. He loved Marcus's grandmother almost as much as his own mother. She needed medicine, treatment we couldn't afford, so I started selling. Just weed at first, making enough for her medical bills. But then she got worse, needed expensive experimental therapy that cost $30,000. Marcus's voice was getting stronger as he talked. "So I started selling harder stuff. Told myself it was temporary, just until Nana got better. But she died when I was 17, and by then I was in too deep. Got arrested when I was 19. 3 years in Chino. When I got out, everything was different. All my connections gone, neighborhood changed. I didn't know how to do anything else. That's when you started using? Yeah, at first just to deal with depression, coming out of prison with no skills, no money, no family. But once you start with that shit, it's like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Tupac was crying openly now, not caring who saw him. How long have you been on the streets? About 8 years now. Lost my last apartment in '87. Since then, it's been shelters when they have space. Abandoned buildings when they don't. Doorways and alleys when there's nowhere else to go. The timeline hit Tupac like a physical blow. For 8 years, while he'd been living in luxury, accepting awards, traveling the world, his childhood best friend had been homeless, addicted, invisible to everyone except the police who periodically arrested him. I've tried to get clean, Marcus continued, 4, 5 times. Went through detox, went to meetings, got temporary housing, but it never stuck. This life, this addiction, it changes your brain, man. It makes you into someone you don't even recognize. Marcus looked directly at Tupac, and for a moment the years of addiction and pain seemed to fade from his eyes, revealing the intelligent, caring person he'd once been. But you know what's crazy, Pac? Even through all this, even when I was at my absolute lowest, shooting up in abandoned buildings and stealing food to survive, your music kept me going. When Brenda's Got a Baby came out, I knew you understood what it was like to watch someone you love get destroyed by circumstances beyond their control. When I heard Dear Mama, I thought about Nana and how she tried to save me before she died. Marcus reached out and grabbed Tupac's hand, his fingers trembling but strong. Your music reminded me that I used to be somebody, that I used to matter. That somewhere inside this mess, the real Marcus was still alive, still fighting to get out. Those words shattered Tupac completely. His best friend had been using his music to survive the hell that his life had become. Music that Tupac had written about struggle and survival had become a literal lifeline for someone he loved, someone he'd lost, someone he'd failed to save. Marcus, Tupac said, his voice thick with emotion and determination, I'm going to help you. Right now. Today, we're going to get you clean, get you help, get you back on your feet. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. But Marcus shook his head slowly, sadly. Pac, I appreciate that more than you know, more than I can say. But I've tried to get clean before. Multiple times. It never sticks because this addiction, this life, it becomes who you are. It changes something fundamental inside you. I don't care. Tupac said fiercely, with the same protective intensity that Marcus had once shown him. You saved my life when we were kids. You taught me how to be strong, how to fight back, how to believe in myself when nobody else did. You think I'm going to give up on you now? Tupac opened the notebook carefully and immediately gasped. It was filled with poems, song lyrics, short stories, all written in Marcus's handwriting, which was still remarkably neat despite everything he'd been through. The writing was incredible, raw, and honest and powerful in a way that took Tupac's breath away. The first poem was titled, Nana's Last Words, and it captured the pain of watching someone you love die while feeling powerless to save them. Another was called Prison Dreams, and described the way hope slowly dies in confinement. Page after page revealed the voice of someone who had lived through unimaginable pain but still found ways to create beauty from that suffering. Marcus, this is amazing, Tupac said, his voice filled with genuine awe. This is some of the most powerful writing I've ever seen. This is literature, man. This is art. I write when I can't sleep, Marcus explained, his voice gaining strength as he saw Tupac's reaction. When the craving gets so bad, I think I might die if I don't get high. When I start thinking about giving up completely and just walking into traffic, writing helps me remember that I'm still human, that there's still something inside me worth saving. Tupac read poem after poem, each one more devastating and beautiful than the last. Marcus had managed to document his experiences with an honesty and artistry that rivaled anything Tupac had ever written. This wasn't just the rambling of an addict. This was sophisticated literature that captured universal truths about pain, loss, redemption, and the resilience of the human spirit. "We're going to publish this," Tupac said suddenly, his voice filled with conviction. "We're going to turn this into a book, maybe even an album. We're going to share this with the world." "Pac, nobody wants to read about the life of a crackhead," Marcus protested. But Tupac could see a flicker of hope in his eyes. They want to read about survival. They want to read about hope. They want to read about the fact that no matter how far you fall, you can still create something beautiful. This writing proves that addiction doesn't kill creativity, that homelessness doesn't kill art, that there's dignity and worth in every human being. For the first time since their reunion began, Marcus smiled genuinely, and Tupac could see glimpses of the confident, charismatic teenager he used to be. "You really think people would want to read my stuff?" "I know they would. And more than that, we're going to use this to help you get clean. For real this time. Not just detox and meetings, but real support, real help, real hope." Tupac spent the next 4 hours with Marcus on that street corner, and those 4 hours changed both of their lives forever. They talked about their childhood, about the dreams they used to share when they were sitting on Mrs. Williams's front porch planning their futures. They talked about the different paths their lives had taken, about the moments when everything could have gone differently. Tupac learned about Marcus's struggles in detail, his multiple attempts at recovery, his moments of hope and crushing disappointment, his daily battle just to survive on the streets. But he also saw that despite everything Marcus had been through, the core of who he was, the loyalty, the creativity, the fundamental goodness, was still there, buried, but not dead. Most importantly, Tupac realized that his success meant nothing if he couldn't use it to help the people who had helped make him who he was. Marcus had believed in him when nobody else did, had protected him when he was vulnerable, had taught him lessons about strength and loyalty that had carried him through his entire career. As the sun started to set and the neighborhood began to grow more dangerous, Tupac made Marcus a promise that would define the rest of both their lives. "I'm not leaving you here tonight," Tupac said firmly. "You're coming home with me. Tomorrow, we're finding you the best treatment program in California. And when you're ready, we're going to work together on your writing, on sharing your story, on helping other people who are fighting the same battles you've been fighting." Marcus started to protest, to insist that he was beyond help, but Tupac cut him off with an intensity that reminded Marcus of the determined little boy he used to know. "You saved my life multiple times when we were kids, Marcus. You shared your food with me when my family didn't have enough. You protected me from bullies who wanted to hurt me. You believed in my dreams when I barely believed in them myself. You think I'm going to let you die on these streets? You think I'm going to walk away from you when you need me most? Pac, I might not make it. Recovery might not work this time either. I might disappoint you, might relapse, might break your heart. Then we'll try again. And if that doesn't work, we'll try again after that, but I'm not walking away from you. We're brothers, remember? Real brothers don't give up on each other, no matter what. The reunion with Marcus became a turning point in Tupac's understanding of what success really meant. He realized that fame meant nothing if he couldn't use it to help the people who had helped make him who he was. Marcus did enter treatment, and while his recovery was difficult, having Tupac's support made the difference. They worked together on Marcus's notebook, turning it into a book of poetry called Letters from the Bottom that would be published posthumously. The experience fundamentally changed Tupac's music. His lyrics became more focused on systemic issues that trap people in cycles of poverty and addiction. He started a foundation providing support for addiction recovery programs in underserved communities. Marcus lived for 2 more years after their reunion, the best 2 years of his life since childhood. He got clean, rekindled his creativity, and knew he was loved unconditionally. When Marcus died of an overdose in 1997, 2 months after Tupac was killed, his funeral was attended by hundreds whose lives he'd touched through his writing. His final poem was dedicated to Tupac. You found me broken on the street where we used to play and reminded me that love doesn't disappear, it just waits. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for proving that brothers never really say goodbye. This story reminds us that we're all just a few bad breaks from losing everything and a few good breaks from turning it around. Success without compassion is meaningless, and sometimes the most important thing we can do is refuse to give up on people we love. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that everyone deserves a second chance, and that love can make the difference between life and death.